Oh my god, I just read the chapter. As you can see, the chapter was phenomenal. And before I get into actually talking about the chapter, giving my review, giving my analysis on the chapter, I implore you to click off the video if you have not seen the chapter or if you've even not seen Berserk for some reason. With that said, I want to give a huge shout out to the assistants of Kentaro Miura for actually publishing this chapter and actually creating another chapter from the leftover work of Miura. I just want to thank them for giving us this beautiful opportunity to enjoy Berserk once more this year. So shout out to all the assistants of Miura, and of course shout out to Miura himself. Rest in peace, legend. Now, with that out of the way, let's actually talk about chapter 364. I'm going to one by one talk about what happens in this chapter. So we start off immediately from the last chapter where Guts met up with the Moonlight Boy for the first time in a very long time, and they basically interact a little bit. The Moonlight Boy goes on Guts, kind of like father and son, and you know, they kind of interact with the people like Shirka, Isidro, Farnese, and you know, the people that Guts has been traveling with for a long time. A bit of comedic moments, some really cute moments with the Moonlight Boy, and of course we see this panel right here of the Moonlight Boy jumping into Casca's arms. Right after this panel, you scroll down and you can see that the leaks were in fact real. This panel of Guts looking into the moonlight with Casca sleeping in the bed with the Moonlight Boy, these leaks were real. Now if you saw the leak video, you know it's about to happen. You know what the ending of this chapter has in store. So, before we get to the end of the chapter, we gotta talk about the rest of the chapter, of course. So the Moonlight Boy and Casca have a lot of interaction. The next day kind of rolls around, and what ends up happening on the next day, the Moonlight Boy travels with Casca and the whole crew. They go for a little walk, I guess, through Elfheim, and they basically just have a good time. And right here, the people in Elfheim mention something, talking about how the Moonlight Boy seems like an ordinary child. Now, we know that the Moonlight Boy is not an ordinary child. He does have a part of Griffith in him, so he's not technically a normal baby, just as they say right here. It also mentions that the spirits in Elfheim can't sense any malice inside the Moonlight Boy, which I find very interesting. I think that has something to do with Griffith. And after these peaceful interactions, we see this other leaked panel that comes out right here. I mentioned this in my video about the leaks yesterday. Right here, we see Guts swing his sword and he lets go of the sword. Now, previously I mentioned that I think this could be some symbolism, saying that since he threw the sword away, he now is kind of moving away from fighting. That's kind of the symbolism there. But when I reconsider, I think it's just the side effects of the Berserker armor. I think I was going a bit farther with that, but I think this is the side effects of the Berserker armor. Speaking of the Berserker armor, the Moonlight Boy immediately crawls out of the Berserker armor, and Guts has this cute conversation with the Moonlight Boy, just as father and son would, and this leads to a certain dialogue said by Casca. She says, "Being like this feels natural." And as she goes more into her memories when she's sleeping, she begins to think about the Moonlight Boy and where she first saw him for the very first time. And this panel right here shows a picture of the Moonlight Boy in his original form and all the ghosts from the eclipse around Casca, and she realizes what the Moonlight Boy's true identity is. Now, this is the big thing about the chapter. Obviously, the chapter was so peaceful and so beautifully done, right? But right here, oh my goodness, this thing is insane. Basically, what happens is Guts is outside with the Moonlight Boy, and as the Moonlight Boy stares into the distance, Guts looks at him, wondering what's going on, as Casca jumps out of the house, looking at the Moonlight Boy as well, and these exact words come out of the Moonlight Boy's mouth. "I had a dream. Under the full moon, I was a child embraced by nostalgic warmth. But when I woke up from the dream, only a vague sense of longing remains. That too will soon disappear with a single tear like morning dew." That was the name of the chapter. Well, yes, this was insane. But if you actually look at the panel, Griffith is right there in front of us. Griffith himself is at the end of this chapter. Do you know how insane of a cliffhanger that was? They really just did that to us. They really gave us this cliffhanger. I mean, at this point, I feel like Berserk has to kind of continue, because with a cliffhanger like this, That is some craziness. The Moonlight Boy transforms into Griffith. Imagine a conversation with Guts and Griffith. Imagine chapter 365. Guts and Griffith have a conversation. Like, what? That was mainly the review portion of the video where I talk about the chapter, but right here I want to do a bit of analysis on what I think Griffith is actually saying right here. So he mentions, under the full moon I was a child embraced with nostalgic warmth, meaning probably that under the full moon he becomes the Moonlight Boy. He later goes on to say, but when I woke up from the dream, only a vague sense of longing remained. This may not be the official translation, but only a vague sense of longing remains, meaning that he kind of loses a part of himself when he wakes up from the dream, I assume. And he says right here, that too will soon disappear. I think this goes back to the point where he talked to Guts on the Hill of Swords, saying that he is free and saying that he has no emotions anymore. I think this right here is kind of talking about that when he transforms into the Moonlight Boy, he kind of becomes an old version of himself that he was before the whole eclipse and everything like that. That is just an assumption by me. I don't 100% know if that's what happened. So to add on about this panel of Griffith crying, it's kind of incredible how we haven't seen Griffith cry probably throughout the entire series of Berserk. Maybe one other time in the Golden Age arc, but he did mention the Conviction arc, that he is free of all his emotions. And right here, he is crying. So it's very interesting to think, what could this mean? And what could this mean for the future of Griffith's character, for Guts' character, how he reacts to seeing Griffith for the first time in a very long time. For the first time since he's changed into becoming this different person that he now is. These two things, if there is another chapter, could very well be solved. And if there is another chapter, I mean, it's just gonna be ridiculously good. The last thing this chapter has is a message for all the fans of Kentaro Miura, and it's a beautiful message over here by the Young Animal editing department. And when you read this, it's just really sad to think about Miura and everything like that. But that is basically it for the chapter. If you do want a link to the chapter, I will leave a link to where I read it in the description. Since there has been a lot of unofficial releases of the chapter where a lot of pages were missing and some weren't translated properly, so I'm going to leave the version that I read in the description below, since to me I'm pretty sure that was a very accurate chapter to what actually came out. So I'm going to leave a link to the chapter in the description below. But that is going to do it for this review portion of the video. Now I might make another video talking about the chapter a bit more if I do think I need to talk about the whole Griffith situation, but that is for another video. So I hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe if you are new. But as always, take care and peace.